learn something about myself.
And we're okay with that.
No,
Or is that like this?
life's a journey.
We started
Life is a
design engineering.
yes, it is.
No,
We're getting close.
so
Last
you were at the public hearing. So the public hearing took place.
Up the vent.
We'll have another
Yeah,
poll.
right.
26 where Josh will come in with the preliminary.
Melinda's like, it's so cold in the
So yes, they are in the process, but it's not done yet.
Usually cold down
We're
there.
almost there.
yes, I don't know.
This is in that corner. It's over.
That's what I've been wondering, the windows.
Yeah, because I'm sure they're.
I know. So you can't do anything but walk it. You can't bike.
I was working on that.
Ian's got it like 110 and it's ridiculous.
When I tried to go back through the history and look at the history of the project, it goes back
Yeah, I guess you can. Yeah, 'cause
2013, 14, and then again in 17, 18.
I was here in 2013.
Australia was,
Do anything for President's Day as a town?
The quick fix in
the only one side
2000.
is Australia.
You could see part of that.
17, was
I
it?
don't know. Something like that.
We can party down. If you're gonna come back the same way, well, it'd be kind of pointless to do that though.
Yeah.
Like,
You get what I'm
have
saying.
it off at my way. Yeah, because the town's closed.
I used to carry skis up,
I'm just surprised.
Oh, that we do
Surprised
have
they
it up,
closed,
right?
yeah.
ski down.
You don't close your ice
head
cream
wall,
shop.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, probably not on any holidays, really, do you?
Yeah, but that's only like a 2.5.
Easter, actually.
True.
Just seems weird.
That's not so
Yeah, it is a weird one.
Point.
6 or 7
Be surprised it's
Is that a low volume ice cream day?
July 4th can be a low
Yeah,
volume.
my days of doing that kind of over.
That's
anyway.
surprising.
You know, barbecues.
Because if it's nice,
and-
then
right.
wait. If it's nice, is it more busy or less busy?
It
Because people are at their barbecues, so
depends.
then they don't.
Not
come?
highly designed.
Because sometimes even rainy days, because people don't have anything to do with their kids, so they come for it.
I don't look like that. He's in
So
jail.
who's the new member?
Good place.
Brought him to jail.
I'm Bill Bolton, by the way.
Mr. Bolton, nice to meet you. New member.
Forgot his hat.
A lot of
Forgot
pain.
his hat.
Yeah,
You were
pick
sick
on her.
for a while, weren't you?
He had hand surgery.
Oh, answer.
Can't quite scoop yet, but
You always have that other hand.
I can't. I can't.
Doesn't work that way.
Left scoop?
No. I came in yesterday to do paperwork, and somebody thought we were open, and I'm like,
Did you use the
can
blower?
I get 2 quarts? Oh, are you kidding me? Took me about a half an hour. I'll do it, but it's all good.
Committed. Ooh, it's 5 o'clock. Let's call this meeting to order. Marianne, you can lead us today.
And we have some meetings, right? Minutes, right?
Yes, let's get the minutes
I'll make a
processed.
motion to approve the January 8th, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll follow up with that, a motion to approve the January 8th final budget meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Announcements. The Select Board will meet on the following dates. Thursday, February 8th, which will be the second public hearing, if needed, about the budget and the reading of the warrant articles. And that begins at 5 p.m. Monday, February 12th, will be a regular meeting at 5 p.m. Monday, February 26th, another regular meeting at 5 p.m. The presidential primary election is tomorrow, January 23rd, and the polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., located at Plymouth Elementary School. Town offices will be closed on Monday, February 19th, in observance of President's Day. Any citizens wishing to be listed on the Select Board's agenda should notify Town Hall before noon the Thursday before the scheduled meeting. All meetings will be held here upstairs in Town Hall and will be available by Zoom. Zoom information can be found on the town's website at plymouthnh.gov. All right. Looks like we're getting a pretty good crowd here. That's good. I don't have any particular comments, so let's jump into Scott's and see if we can get these done before we kick off the hearing.
Sure. Thank you, Zach. Good evening and welcome. Town manager's report for this week. I'll read off the items that I have listed. Property assessments and tax rate meetings. Over the past 4 weeks, I've met with several concerned citizens about their property assessment and their tax bills. Most current meeting was with the homeowners at Brookside Circle and Beach Hill on Sunday, January 14th. We had a great conversation and talked through the assessment process, the reevaluation process, and the setting of the tax rate. Tax payments. Zach, this is kind of a follow-up to our last meeting with regards to allowing tax payments through the month of April. Right now, we've had 5 requests that total about $7,000, which would represent about $560 in interest that we would ask to abate at the end of April. So I'm checking back in with the board to see if this is still acceptable and should we allow Linda to move forward with these tax payments with regards to the abatement of interest at the end of April.
Acceptable to me.
Acceptable to me.
I was just wondering what qualifies.
These are all elderly individuals on fixed incomes.
And do we know how many people?
5 property owners,
5 right now, but in total?
correct, 5 total right now.
But do we know how many elderly?
We don't, those
Okay.
are the only ones that have been in to talk to Linda to enter into agreements.
Okay.
Right, they have to come into Linda, they have to discuss the situation with her, and
Correct.
so she has a whole process for assessing that.
Thanks.
You need a motion for that?
We were headed towards consensus. Neil, Marianne?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you've got consensus.
Okay. Next, department head meeting. We'll have a department head meeting on Wednesday, January 24th. We'll be discussing the following items: total compensation package memorandum, annual leave, the 2024-2025 budget that will be presented tonight, town meeting preparation, individual strategic priorities and goals, and department's access to the town website. Plymouth Police Department, one of their cruisers, a 2019, was involved in an accident as it struck a trailer hitch that was in the middle of the roadway. The trailer hitch wasn't identified because there was a car in front of it that also went over the trailer hitch. The cruiser sustained considerable damage. We are currently working with Primex, our property casualty carrier, for the adjudication of the claim. We don't have any final information as of this time. New Hampshire National Guard Armory update. On Thursday, January 11th, I met with Major David Michelatis with regards to the status of the armory in Plymouth. Their plan is to demolition the current armory and build a new armory on site. I invited the major to meet with the select board once the plans are finalized and it's been through the executive council. The major will be reaching out in March to meet with the select board at one of our March meetings.
It's good. What are they doing with the property out on?
That will come with a decision from the executive council. Pease Public Library, Library Director Rebecca Whitney has resigned her position. Rebecca accepted a job in Connecticut. Rebecca states, "This experience has taught me the importance of family and I need to be closer. My last day will be 2 weeks from today, January 26th. I met with the trustees on Wednesday, January 17th, and we'll be working with them, with the trustees to start a search for a new librarian position." Total compensation package memorandum, and this is a follow-up from the last meeting, Zach. I think Ann sent everybody a copy of the compensation memorandum that we have put together, and I didn't know if there was any feedback, or is the board all set with us providing these to staff?
Yeah, it seemed fine to me.
Okay?
And that's something new, right? We've never done that. What did I do?
Future budget meetings tonight, and Zach just went through those meetings, so I'll skip over that. Plymouth State University update. Plymouth State University, meeting with Jessica Dutal on Thursday, January 4th. I met with Jessica. We discussed a number of topics to include parking during flooding events, permit parking at Fox Park, transfer student orientation on Sunday, January 24th, which I attended and spoke at, and the continued work on the Pirate Party for 2024, including events for underage students off-site. The PSU Master Planning Executive Committee on Thursday, January 18th. I met with the PSU Master Planning Executive Committee. Items discussed were residential life, housing strategies on and off campus, student apartments, a campus perspective, academic versus non-academic, student support services across campus. What are thoughts on future changes, long-term and short-term, to housing and services? They have a tentative meeting scheduled to come in and present to the board on February 12th, although I did hear today that that date doesn't work, so they'll be coming in March to present at one of our 2 meetings. A quick update on the downtown drainage project. I'll begin to schedule meetings for the construction schedule for the spring of 2024. I do plan on having a public meeting with regards to input and scheduling for the spring, tentatively scheduled to start in March. Other things of interest, the town report. We're working on the town report. Colleen Kenny is taking the lead on that. We would like to get some information on page dedications within the town report, as well as I would like to put something in there with regards to longstanding employees with the town of Plymouth to showcase them, represent them, and show their years of service. I will be attending a Bridgewater Selectboard meeting on Wednesday night with regards to Hunt Road East and talking to them about an easement for construction of a culvert and bridge in that area. And that concludes my report. I'll take any questions or comments if there are any.
I do have a,
Oh, no, go ahead.
sorry. you
No, go ahead.
The PSU Master Planning Committee, are you on that, or is it just PSU folks? Seems some things will hit the town,
It's
obviously.
typically all of the cabinet with
Okay.
Plymouth State University. They've invited me to seek input in making sure that they are communicating effectively with the town on what they're doing with their master plan.
Okay, great, thank you.
Can I ask you a question about the Hunt Road thing? So are they really going to entertain an easement, or this is basically, or right away that they're going to allow for?
They're willing to put an easement in place. I've been working with Attorney Radigan on what the best solution for the issue is. And I've spoken with the board over there, and I'll be meeting with them Wednesday night to formalize how that easement will be put in place.
Okay,
That's great.
yeah.
That was the exact question I was going to ask. Are they willing participants in that?
They are.
That's awesome. Very good. Any other questions for Scott about his report? We are running a little
Signature
early.
file.
Yeah. Let's hit the signature file just to give us 5 more minutes to hit our time here.
Okay, the first item that I have for the board to sign tonight is we have 2 release of restitution liens. These are welfare liens that we had on a property, and actually, I'm sorry, there's 3 of them. The individuals actually paid the town back in the amount of $4,162.15. I have the check, it has cleared the bank, and I'm asking the board to release those liens. The next item is a legally blind individual that we have here in town who has applied for the blind exemption. And according to the assessor, meets all the qualifications. Those are the only 2 things I had to sign.
Perfect. Thank you.
What is a blind exemption?
Someone would have to be legally blind according to New Hampshire regulations, and they would get an exemption on their property taxes for that.
What's the amount? It's not It's like,
It's on there, I'm sorry. I
No, it's
think it's
fine.
15,000, but I don't know for sure.
This is weird.
if there are folks looking for chairs, we do have a couple extras if we want to pull them to the back. I don't know how people are doing in the back there.
A couple over here.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. There's a couple that could be moved if we need them.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Let me send this back down here.
Any other questions about those? Anything? 3 minutes to fill.
Nothing for you.
I had a question about which line to sign on. I think that was kind of confusing to me.
It was confusing to me, too.
It's always best to go after you guys. You figured it out.
I think whatever. I think I screwed up another one, but whatever.
I don't want to say anything.
You better not say anything.
Yeah, really.
This,
Usually
whatever
like 3 lines. Exactly.
It's from my childhood.
Can you make sure everyone has picked up a package from the back for the hearing?
Oh, yeah. So there are packages in the back for anybody who's here. There's a few different sheets. The green sheet that's here shows some estimated or anticipated revenues, both the historical from 22-23, then what we expect for this year, and what we're sort of projecting for next year, which is helpful in understanding the tax rate. Then there's going to be this orange one, which is really just kind of a summarized version of the budget. It doesn't have all the line items, but sort of gives you the high-level categorizations. And then there should be a full packet that's got all of the line items for the budget. So anybody who wants to understand the details, those are there. We're also, once we kick off, we're going to walk through a sort of explanation slide deck that kind of explains each of the different departments and where they're at and what's been changed this year, so that hopefully we've got good context, and then we'll take questions from anybody who has them.
Yeah. Did you put plenty back there? Because you gave me an extra one when I came in that one time.
Yeah, does anybody else need one?
Oh, is there the next one in your book?
Ann printed 75, she said, so we should be fairly good shape.
You okay?
Actually failed. All right. It is 5:15. I am going to open the public hearing. Scott, I know you have a little bit of introduction that you wanted to share. While you're doing that, I'm going to get the screen share reconnected.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight is our first public budget hearing on the 24-25 budget. And I just wanted to provide some opening comments with regards to where we are today, where we started in July, and what we took away from town meeting last year. Last year at town meeting, we were given a number of items that we would work on over the course of the year. Some of those things were select board strategic priorities, review all tax-exempt nonprofit organizations, to assure that each of them meets the requirements for this status, and to continue to work on pilot agreements. I can tell you that over the course of the year, all of the tax-exempt nonprofit organizations have been met with by our assessing department. We've had conversations with them, as well as looking and visiting their sites to assure they meet all the requirements of a nonprofit tax-exempt status. We were able to find some of the properties that weren't on the tax roll that will be added to the tax roll. Capital improvement plan for the second year of the plan, which creates sustainability On capital purchases to include infrastructure, equipment, land, and buildings, we've updated our capital improvement plan. This is done in conjunction with the planning board and gets the stamp of approval from the planning board as it moves through the process to the select board. Policy and procedure development. We've developed procurement policies, purchasing, contracts, credit card policy, fund balance policy, a delinquent tax policy, and a recycling center payment policies. All of these policies have been developed and approved and adopted by the select board. So we've strengthened our financial management and liability over the course of the year. All of those things can't be seen right now, but they will be seen as we move forward. Grant research and acceptance of funds. Supplementing grant funds in lieu of budget expenditures. Credit goes to all departments that have seeked grant opportunities: the fire department, the police department, the rec department, the park department, and the highway department have all received grants this year, which work in collaboration with expenditures and monies that are appropriated in the budget. And one of the big things we were tasked to look at was our ambulance service budget. Overview and true operating cost with contracted towns. That has been completed, and that is part of the budget as we move forward tonight with Zach's presentation. As you can imagine, the budget takes a considerable amount of time to put together. We start this process back in July, and I have to commend all of the department heads for coming in and sitting through several meetings with myself, the finance director, the budget committee, and the select board. What we looked at and what we tasked them with from the beginning of this process are what is the what, the wants, the needs, and what is the justification for each one of those lines in your budget. And we thoroughly examined those areas, and you'll see what the result of that is at the end of the presentation. I firmly believe that we need to have a balanced budget in the town of Plymouth that the majority of the taxpayers can support. This means meeting expectations and creating sustainability for the town. As you recall, last year was the first year of the capital improvement program. What a capital improvement program does is it allows us to budget for over a period of 6 to 8 years, looking at the infrastructure, looking at the buildings, looking at the equipment, looking at the land that we own, and most importantly, like I said, the buildings. These buildings, our equipment, our roads, our streets have been let go for quite some time. And you notice last year we made quite a few improvements on the in-town roads and pavement and sidewalks. So the capital improvement program creates sustainability over a period of 6 to 8 years, trying to keep the budget at the same rate over that period of time, but making sure that we're addressing the capital programs and projects that the town of Plymouth needs to address. If approved, this budget represents a $2.2 million less than the appropriated budget in 23 and 24. In 23 and 24, the appropriation was $15,032,000. If this budget is approved, the appropriation will be $12,758,000, which is a decrease of approximately 15%, resulting in a potential tax decrease of $1.24 per thousand, which is the current tax rate on the town portion of the tax rate is $11.09. This would bring that down to $9.85 per thousand in valuations. Keeping in mind that this is all gross appropriations, and the revenues that you see on the green sheet of paper are estimates. Our best case estimate, looking at not from a low side nor from a high side, but trying to come in the middle from what we've seen over the course of 5 to 10 years, and estimating those revenue appropriations effectively and appropriately into the budget. So some of the highlights that you'll see, and Zach will talk about, are the salaries, the employees, the personnel, health insurance, our property casualty insurance, workers' compensation, and the overall increase in inflation for services, equipment, and purchases. But as you can see, we've reduced that budget and really looked closely at what is sustainable for the residents in the town of Plymouth and the property owners. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. All right, so I'm going to go through some detailed numbers. Yeah.
I just wonder if I could ask the town manager a couple things.
Yep, yes, that's fine.
I want to say I very much appreciate this letter that you wrote.
Mr. Tucker, could you approach the microphone just so we can make sure we capture your voice?
I very much appreciate this letter that you wrote. I got it off the desk downstairs, but it would probably be good if you could include it in the tax bills. In spite of this drastic understatement, most taxpayers will not see a decrease in their taxes for the 2023 tax years. My taxes went up 20%.
As did mine.
Okay. And I want to also ask you, it talks about the fund balance as being $331,000. That seems like about what we carry every year, or when I was a selectman. But you say here it's equivalent to 1.5% of what the overall recommended fund balance recommended by the New Hampshire Department of Revenue would want. So what would they want?
They want anywhere from 10 to 15%, which is what we're working towards. When I took over a year ago, it was about the same. That's why we implemented a fund balance policy, so we have something to work towards and strive to meet the DRA requirement.
Which sounds to me like it should be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Should be much more than what it is, John. You're absolutely correct.
Okay. And on the back of the sheet, you list the tax rates for the last 4 years. And I assume the 2023 one is after the reval?
I don't have that.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This represents a tax increase average every year of about 6%, which seems to me a little high, but regardless. And going back to the increase in our tax bills, a revaluation doesn't necessarily mean your taxes will go up. Your tax bill will go up because your valuation goes down. What contributed to this huge increase, 20% in single-family homes?
The
So-
increase is, oh no, go ahead, Zach. Go ahead.
So the biggest issue in this particular, so it had been a while, right? It had been a bit of time since we'd done them. But to your point, if everything was equal in town, the valuation would go up, your tax rate would go down, and you wouldn't actually experience an increase in the expense to your pocket if everything was equal. But two things happened this time. One, the budget that was approved at town meeting last year was a significant increase. It was not a 6% increase. I don't know the exact number. I'm not sure if Ann or Scott knows it, but it was.
It was increased by $2.47 per thousand based on the budget that was approved.
So that's almost 15%, something in that. So the taxes at town meeting that were voted on were higher. The second thing that happened is in the revaluation, single-family homes went up significantly, and commercial property in town did not go up the same amount. So commercial property saw sort of a slower growth over, post-COVID, has seen a slower growth in its value, while single-family homes have skyrocketed, which does mean that the actual expense to the taxpayers, some shift happened where commercial properties probably saw their taxes go down, while single-family residents saw their taxes go up in response. So it was the combination of those two things that impacted all of us who are single-family homeowners most significantly.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, thank you. Those are great questions. All right, so let's get into some details. Scott talked about the budget schedule a little. We did just want to highlight, but this is a long process. We start in July. Lots of people participate to bring us to this point, which is the first official budget hearing. All these other meetings are The capital improvement and the budget committee meetings are, of course, open meetings. The select board meetings with departments are open meetings that we've been streaming. So hopefully those of you who are particularly concerned have been following along. But I want to commend in particular the budget committee and CIP committees for all the work that they've done over the past 6 months to get us to this point. This is, of all the budgets we've seen, this one is the tightest. They've done really good work to sort of squeeze this in a time where I think it really needed it. So thank you to the budget committee and CIP committees. All right, some notes and disclaimers about the numbers and the things that I'm going to talk about and show in this slide deck. Any of the mentions that I make about the tax rate, to the impact on the tax rate, those are estimated based on a rough calculation of the current valuation. The current valuation of the town is just shy of $800 million. And they don't reflect any changes to revenue. So if suddenly our revenues go up, we get a grant, or we get this or that, the ambulance starts billing better, like none of that is represented in those effects. Also, everything that we talk about is gross appropriations. So we talk about the total amount of money that we're going to expend. It doesn't, since our revenues fluctuate, it doesn't directly affect that. Also, in recent years, we have ended the year with a budget surplus, and then we've used that budget surplus both to offset some of the effect on the tax rate, as well as continue to build that reserve fund that Mr. Tucker was asking about, which remains underfunded based on the size of our town. So we've been trying to build that. We've consistently built it over the past 5 years. We're hoping we will continue to do that and sort of split that money both to build our savings as a town as well as offset the tax rate where possible. All right, we've talked a little bit and we've had some questions about the tax rate. I just wanted to share some context on the full Plymouth tax rate. It is made up of 4 components. There is the town component, and this is the piece we're going to talk about tonight, which is the town budget. Current tax year, the town's component of this is $11.09 per thousand. But then there's also the school. So that's the local school systems, both the elementary school and the high school combined into that rate. And you can see that that's a significant part of our overall taxes. And then we have a county component and an additional state component. So those 4 numbers add up to generate the total tax rate for our town, and that's what your bill's based off of. So we're going to talk tonight about the town piece, and the other 3 are really outside of this board's jurisdiction. All right, you all have this as a handout in front of you. I'm mostly showing this for our folks on Zoom or who are watching this on replay on YouTube or maybe even watching it on cable. But everybody in the room has a handout with these numbers. These are the estimated revenues for the town. Just to give you some context, as you look at a budget, like the ambulance budget, you can go back and reference this and see how much revenue does our ambulance generate? And this gives you sort of a rough idea of that. Or, we talk about the PBTV budget. You can see, hey, these are the estimated revenues that we get from PBTV. So again, this is mostly here as a reference point, just so that as we talk about some of these departments that have revenue as part of what they do, it gives you just a little bit more insight. All right, quick summary. Scott already shared the relatively good news that the budget we're proposing tonight is a decrease of $1.24 in the overall tax rate. We are talking about reducing that appropriation by a pretty substantial amount. You'll see a couple different numbers depending on which handouts you're looking at or which numbers, which can get confusing. Happy to go into lots of depth clarifying. Sometimes we say that number that we're reducing is as little as 474,000, and sometimes we say it's as much as what was the number Scott quoted, 2.4? 2.2 million. And the reason of that is because last year in gross appropriations we had the $1.8 million bond that was voted on, and so that bond and the intake of that bond was part of the overall $15 million budget. We obviously aren't entering into another bond agreement this year. We're not transferring another $1.8 million through the budget. So for most equalization and to really understand the impact, we're sort of removing that from most of the numbers. So the number comes down when we remove that out. It's still negative. It's still the $1.24 that we're talking about. But it is we're using slightly different numbers when we consider or don't consider an expense from the previous year's budget. So if anybody has questions about that, happy to go into more detail, but you may see some slightly different numbers. One of the biggest things that we're going to talk about that we've done this year is we've reorganized our health and dental insurance out of the departmental budgets and into its own standalone budget line item. This was done for a lot of reasons, but the biggest one is to protect the privacy of our employees and give us some better compliance around some of the regulations. So you can't, look at a budget line item and try to predict what healthcare plan somebody's on or something like that. We're combining all of that into one item. One thing that does is cause some complexity around doing year-over-year comparisons. In this slide deck, I have done some work to kind of normalize the numbers to take that reorganization effect out so we can actually see the department increases. The downside of that is the numbers I'm going to show you in the individual departments don't directly match the pink sheet here, but in summation they do, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a second. Another thing we did is we reorganized PBTV into its own budget. As you saw on the revenue screen, PBTV has revenue associated with it. So we thought it would be clearer to the town and to individuals to know, here's the cost of our Pennybacker television production capabilities, and here's the revenues they take in. It helps to kind of offset and understand, what's the actual cost of running all the things that PBTV runs. We also reorganized the ambulance costs out of fire and into ambulance. This was, and we'll talk more about this when we get to it, but this was really to make it much more clear when we're billing towns for ambulance service what the total, full, all-in cost for running a regional ambulance service is, and just makes things a whole lot better for our billing. And the last thing that we did that's pretty significant in terms of the overall impact is we were able to defer some leased payments for some of the capital costs. So when you order a fire truck, you aren't going to take that delivery. It's not like ordering a new, Toyota pickup. You're not going to, take delivery of that the day you go in and sign papers. It can take 18, 24 months, 36 months these days. It can take a very long time between the time that you place an order for a fire truck and when you take delivery. And if we don't have to pay the lease prices on that fire truck until we take delivery, there's no reason for us to effectively have the taxpayers paying for that up front. So we can defer those lease payments until we receive the actual equipment that's been approved, and that reduces some of our short-term capital expenses. All right, that's the big summary. We'll get into some more details here. Before we do that, though, I want to step back again. Some of this stuff we look at it, once a year or maybe once every 5 years, and so it's really helpful to just stop and think about what do these tax rates mean? How do we get these? Where do they come from? Right. So this is the basic math. You have operating budget appropriations. You're going to have special warrant articles. You're going to have individual warrant articles. Those all show up and get voted on at town meeting. That adds up to our total gross appropriation, how much money we intend to spend as a town to run the town. Then we subtract from that any anticipated revenues and credits, again, referring back to the green sheet, right? Subtract that out. And then you get the number, how much money do we have to raise from the taxpayers to effectively run the town? Our tax rate is a fairly basic calculation where you take that total amount of taxes to be raised, you divide it by the town valuation, which in this case, we're using a rough number of 800 million, and that gives you the tax rate. So in this case, with everything we've lined up, we're anticipating a tax rate of $9.85 for the town portion after you do all of this math. So just trying to make it perfectly clear, how do we get from, various line items, budgets, departments to setting a tax rate. This is the calculation. Feel free to go back and check it out or ask questions during the open session. All right, so I talked about the health and dental making things a little bit complicated. If you just look at the departments and you summarize them up in this format, which is what we started using last year, it looks like the general government section has skyrocketed in costs, right? I don't know if everybody can see these numbers, but it looks like when you do it this way, general government's up 52%, which would be madness, right? And you can see other departments like Parks and Rec looks like they're having a grand time at negative 10%, right? So you look down the list and you're just like, this is very strange. And the reason that this is this way is because we moved stuff around in the budget. So what we're going to do for the rest of this conversation, and you can review these, I'm happy to go back to them, but effectively what we can do is we can take the health and dental reorg, which you can see is some of these new columns that have been added, and we can kind of exclude those from the conversation to figure out what is the actual increase for these departments. And so the rest of these slides will use that kind of adjusted, more realistic actual effect if we didn't do the reorganization. So then you can see, well, no, in fact, general government's down 4.2%, which is a big difference than up 52. It's actually down 4.2. So we're going to express it that way. You can see the bottom line, everything adds up exactly the same. There's no funny business here. It's just trying to express the reorganization of the health and dental, which had such a big impact, in a way that's more of a true year-over-year representation. So we're going to use kind of these numbers going forward as we review each department, which again, I apologize, that means they won't match exactly the orange sheet, because the orange sheet has the reorganized health and dental in it. So moving forward, general government. What did we do in general government? We had 3% raises this year, so that adds some of our cost. As I talked about, we reorganized health and dental. As an effect of reorganizing the health and dental, we offer new plans to employees for them to pick. Some of those new plans are cheaper for the employee and cheaper for the town. They're particularly attractive to maybe our younger employees in town who would like more money in their pocket because they don't have as big a health concerns in the short term. That ends up being a win-win for the town and the employees. So renegotiating and offering more health and dental plans to our employees actually allowed us to reduce the cost of health and dental in town by 14.5%, which is particularly impressive because the costs of health and dental went up 13%. So the costs went up 13%. Us offering these new deals actually allowed the town to pay 14% less, which is it's just a huge win from Ann and Scott and everybody in the town administration. It's probably, I would say, the single largest win in this budget overall. For I don't know, decades, health insurance costs have been killing us. This is the first time I've ever seen the town take the opposite direction on that. It's very exciting. The other thing we have here is PBTV. You can see it effectively. You can see that money move out of the executive budget line into the PBTV budget line. It's a slight increase overall, but it's less than, I think it's less than $10,000. It's a pretty small piece. Gives us those isolated costs. Elections are up a little bit this year because we've got the cost for a national election in November, which always increases costs. So if you watch the elections budget line item in non-national election years, it gets a little cheaper, and then in national election years, it gets more expensive. So it's always a little bit up and down. We're on a up year this coming year. Financial administration, I had a note there to ask Ann what was going on there, that we saved a bunch of money, and I didn't follow up with her. So I'll just keep going. Land use, we increased hours for a part-time staff member. So you'll see a little, in percentage-wise, it's significant increase there, but in actual budget effect, pretty small. All right, police, pretty great budget overall from our police department this year. This has 3% raises factored in, and due to just some tighter budgeting around the wages line and our savings there, the overall police budget's down 1.1%. This is without cutting any staff or reducing services or any of those sorts of things. It's just a good fiscal conservatism from our police department. So big thank you there. I also made a quick call out because parking generates more revenue than cost. There's been many years in the past that didn't used to be true, but it's true now. And so it's nice that we're not subsidizing all that parking enforcement, that it actually is a break even, if not slightly profitable venture. Fire and ambulance, we've got in this line, we've got 1.5% raises plus market adjustments for retaining some staff there. We also have the very large ambulance reorganization where you can see a bunch of money going out of the fire department line and into the ambulance line. It's effectively, if you look at the end dollars, it's almost a wash as that money moves from one bucket to another. But like I said earlier, this is to express much more clarity about the full costs of running our ambulance service, and allows us a lot better clarity with our town partners and paying community to understand how much it costs to run this service. This is our first kind of new cost that's also here. We have been long working towards staffing up at the fire station to, I think, trying to get we get an additional shift established, right, Chief?
Right, we want to have 3 around the clock per shift.
So we're trying to get to a point where there are 3 people on staff during all shifts. We're increasingly seeing instances where, we're out at an ambulance call, and while we're out at the ambulance call, we're also dealing with a motor vehicle incident and maybe even mutual aid. So you start to put that level of call volume out there, and 2 guys on is it's getting a little bit tough. So we've been planning this over the past 4 years. We've been slowly adding 1 firefighter a year for the past few years. And this is this the final one, or do we have one more? One more. So this is, we're getting close.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please.
That one of the reasons for this, adding more career personnel, is that the call and volunteer thing is dying. When I started this budget, just for an example, last July, we had 17 part-time EMTs. Today we have 13. And it just continues to decline despite our efforts to
Yeah, give it a mic.
bring people in part-time. It's
Chief.
just not an attractive.
Microphone.
Start over.
Probably don't have to do that. You do the
Just
quick
saying that
version.
One of the reasons that drives the fact that we need more career personnel is that the call and volunteer part of our department has been declining for years. It's just not an attractive, they're not beating the door down to do this part-time. So we're having to add more career personnel to augment that.
And that's a statewide problem. Volunteer and call firefighters they're just becoming less and less common. Folks,
Nationwide.
yeah, they just don't want to do the work. Mr. Tucker?
Can I ask the fire chief, who do we
provide
ambulance
I'll repeat.
service for? What towns?
And the gentleman asked what towns we provide services for.
So obviously Plymouth, we also contract with Rumney, Ashland, Holderness, and this end of Bridgewater.
There was an article in the Record Enterprise about you might lose one of those, or?
So the question is about an article in the paper recently about potentially losing one of our, Ashland, I think in particular, for our ambulance service.
Yeah, Ashland has not signed a new contract yet, and they expire June 30 of this year.
And part of that is in reaction to, we increased the costs around our ambulance service.
Would that affect your manning?
No, Ashland's not that big of a hit, call volume wise.
We obviously would prefer to keep Ashland if possible, but
Yeah.
it doesn't make up a large amount of our volume.
I would just say, based on the reevaluation of how we run our ambulance business, because it truly is a business that we run. We provide these services under contract. We know that it cost us $1,069 every time that ambulance rolls out to one of those towns. And we want to make sure, from a sustainability perspective, that you and I and every other taxpayer in the town of Plymouth isn't paying for ambulance calls to Ashland, Bridgewater, or Rumney, or Holderness. they need to fund their cost at the appropriate levels based on the percentage of calls that the ambulance service responds to those communities. So when we did the budget this year, and a lot of credit to Chief Morrison and Deputy Chief Pierce, is really looking at the percentage of calls that go to those 4 towns. And I can tell you, based on that $1.4 million budget, we are going to recoup everything but 52.2%. 52.2% are the calls that happen in Plymouth. 47.7% are the calls that we go to Ashland, Bridgewater, Rumney, and Holderness. So we're appropriately billing the amount due back to the town of Plymouth. So we, the taxpayers in Plymouth, aren't funding those other towns for an ambulance to provide service to them.
And you'll see that math if you look at the estimated revenues again on your green sheet. You can see we're estimating billing about $700,000 for the ambulance against a budget of 1.4 or 1.3 million. So we're trying to recoup about half the cost of our ambulance service from the folks that are using it outside of our town.
Zach, may I?
Yeah, please.
So one thing that also compounds that is the collection rate. Ambulance billing reimbursement is abysmal. That $1,000 per call that Scott spoke about, if it's a Medicare patient, no offense, that's about 50% of our payer mix. We get about $400 and we're done. It's against the law to balance bill them. Secondly, commercial insurance carriers reprice our bills. That $1,000 bill, they'll look at it and say, that's a $600 bill, and we're done. So those are the kinds of losses that we now incorporate in this calculation, particularly when we calculate for those contract towns. We don't mind losing money in Plymouth, but like Scott said, and Zach, we're not gonna.
Right, we can't subsidize the entire region. All right, we can obviously, again, when we take public comment formally, we can get more into this if folks have more questions. Jumping forward to highway, highway is 3% raises plus some cost of material increases. You would be shocked at how much, sand, gravel, salt, all these sorts of things have gone up over the past few years. So I think we've done a good job keeping the overall highway increase at about 2.7%, especially considering the raises and the cost of materials. Recycling and sanitation. This is one of the areas where we're getting hit by inflation kind of the hardest. Disposal costs are up a ton, both in terms of trash and hauling fees for recyclables and those sorts of things. So definitely a lot of cost there. The other thing that's driving the increase in recycling and sanitation is we have a staff member who returned from military leave, who we weren't paying for while they were gone. So now that they're back, some of this increase is disposal costs, some of it's staffing. Parks and Recreation, again, 3% raises. The interesting thing to know about Parks and Rec, we always like to point out, is that the school pays 72% of the parks budget. So that's almost, well, not entirely, but a big chunk of that parks component is subsidized by the schools. So not a strictly town piece. Overall, though, we're looking at about a little over 3.5%, I think is the number there. Library, pretty much the only thing here is 3% raises. There's not a lot of other big details here, but you can see their overall increase is 2.3%. Nonprofits, the only increase in our nonprofits is for Pemmy Baker Community Health Agency. When the nonprofit committee and the budget committee met, they really prioritized two things. They wanted to focus on any nonprofits that were serving children or elderly in the community. And so when they did the full review of the many nonprofits that apply for funding from us, who we say, we appreciate your service, but no, they looked at Pemmy Baker Community Health and decided that was an organization in our community that needed more support and more funding. In raw dollars, we're talking about a little over $4,000 in a $12 million budget. So it's percentage-wise, it's significant, but in total impact, it's relatively small. We've got miscellaneous, and then we could go through all of these in detail, but they're all pretty small. I did want to point out that the airport, if you're just looking at percentages, the one that might give you momentary sticker shock is the 71% on the airport. Again, it's a very small budget. That 71% is an additional $5,000. And that requirement came from a telephone line they needed to add for a call-in weather service thing that they were obligated to add at the airport. So there is an extra $5,000 in the airport budget, which is a large percentage increase, but again, $5,000 in the scheme of things doesn't end up being that large. And when you look at miscellaneous in total, we got minus 8% here. We have a big savings in the welfare line item. And that's not a reduction of services. That was just really a rebalancing of the actual expenses we have for welfare. So overall, miscellaneous is down, even with the airport increase. I'm going to switch gears quickly into just walking through capital improvement. We do have a 6-year capital improvement plan that is published on our website. You can become familiar with it. It talks about 6 years worth of planning for various capital investments. The big things that we've been working on in capital improvement and that do impact this budget is the downtown drainage project. It's that major infrastructure project we've been working on for a couple of years, and we'll get finished up this coming year. The savings that we've achieved from some of the deferred payments on the delayed delivery of equipment, and then the last piece, just that this category includes things like debt service, paying loans, capital land, capital buildings, capital machinery, these sorts of things. So debt service, we're down a little bit on our overall debt service year over year. We really are currently carrying 5 loans. The first is the library loan. The second is a capital improvement bond that we did in 2016, 2017. The third is another infrastructure, effectively capital improvement bond we did in 1920, year 19/20, not 1920. And then the solar array that was approved last year, and the downtown drainage bond that was approved last year as well. So those bottom two are very recent, and the library bond, I'm not certain exactly how many years, but we got to be halfway through that anyway. Capital land and improvements. This one we've got a pretty big drop year over year. Really only four things in this category. Our continued obligation around landfill monitoring. We've got big road construction projects planned for Emerson and New Hebron roads. We've got the finish up on South Main Street. So this is the last component of that downtown drainage project. And then we're kicking off the Highland Street project, which we had a public hearing 2 weeks ago on. We encourage you all to learn about that one. Capital machinery, vehicles, and equipment. Most of these are, all of these are well planned. Fire engine 3. This is the second payment of a 5-payment lease. We've got a Lucas CPR device, which our new ambulance is going to be equipped with, and this is to put one in the other ambulance, so that both ambulances will have these. Actually, Chief, will you give us just a 2-second explanation on what a Lucas CPR device is?
So it takes the Lucas device takes the place of one person doing chest compressions on a patient that's in cardiac arrest. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and this is another one of those things that when we've got only a couple guys driving an ambulance, or on the ambulance, these devices make it so that they can save those lives when they show up. So very important to have these. We currently have a schedule to replace our cruiser every year. So we cycle through. We add one new cruiser to the fleet. They all sort of shuffle as necessary, and one falls out the back end. So we used to do like 3 every 3 years. Now we said, well, it'll be more even if we have a new one coming in every year. We can cycle through them. So this is this year's cruiser. We have a highway 1-ton plow truck that's up for replacement. We've got the lease on the police tasers. And then there's these 4 other items that you're going to see on the warrant, but have no effect immediately on the budget. Again, this goes to the deferred payment component of ordering this equipment and then waiting up to 3 years sometimes before you can get it. I think fire trucks are the worst. Dump trucks are somewhere in the middle. Ambulances are similar to fire trucks, hard to get. So we've got the lease. We'll be doing a lease purchase of a sweeper. We'll be proposing, right? These things will all go on the warrant. Proposing a highway dump truck replacement, an ambulance lease, and a fire engine lease. So these 4 items you'll see on the warrant, but they have no 2024-25 budget impact. Then we have capital buildings. Last year we raised and removed a building, so that's what the $39,000 is. This year we've started the process of really assessing our fire and police buildings. We're probably not doing anything, immediately, but we do have a life end on some of those buildings and that infrastructure. So we're starting to try to get ahead, start planning for at what point are those buildings no longer sufficient. In some ways, we're a little bit past that point, but we, try to get out in front of that. The last thing in capital is a transfer to capital reserve fund. So this is effectively us doing some savings. $5,000 for the Conservation Commission, $20,000 as we store up for our town revaluation, and some PBTV equipment. The other thing that, again, won't show up in the budget, but you will see it on the warrant, we're creating a new capital reserve fund for fire apparatus. In the past, we would create capital reserve funds that was like engine 3 and engine 2, which then just becomes a little bit clunky as we're planning our capital. So we're changing that over to have a fire apparatus capital reserve fund, and we'll have on the warrant the transferring of some fund balances in 2 other fire apparatus related funds. So it just sort of simplifies our fund management. All right, and that brings us to the end. This is, again, the overall summary that we started with, and I can leave that up if people have questions. Happy to toggle around, dig deep onto any of these things, dig deep into any of the handouts you all have, answer any of your concerns, questions, as detailed as you would like. Yeah.
I didn't know if the Budget Committee wanted to provide comment with regards to the review that we did with each department. I don't know if Mike, Mark, Sue, or Matt would like to comment.
It was a pretty good year, believe it or not. I know nobody likes taxes, and we're dealing with that at this point in time, but the procedure for this was incredible. Everybody worked together, pulling in the same direction. And as at least I know, and I think a lot of people here, is we haven't always had that. And this year was just very, very different, and everybody worked extremely hard to keep things in line. And, we made some hard choices too, because you'd like to give everybody what they need and not just what they want. But the board did a great job. As far as the nonprofits, we did look at the elderly and the youth, and we felt that the elderly needed some more money, and that's why we went with that. Tried to be fair with everybody, and trying to talk outside of here to let people know that we're all in this together, and we don't necessarily like the situation, but I think, as Zach said, there's been a lot of, or I believe Scott said, there's been a considerable amount of neglect over the last, I'd say a couple decades in certain areas. Saving the tax and then having to do all the work under the ground with the water and sewer. I mean, you got to pay at some point in time, and unfortunately, this is our time. The other piece that factored in terms of the rate is that we're looking at incredible sales in real estate. The amount of money, people dropping $20,000-$30,000 above asking price, so it forces that up, and that's really not in our control whatsoever. Not to mention struggles with COVID, and then the insurance and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of factors that go into this, and I think we were very, very thorough with what we did, and we were in contact with Zach, the board, and Scott and Ann throughout the process. And I think that it was a good process this year. And even though none of us are really happy with the taxes, I know I'm not, but it's what we want. This is Plymouth, you know. And even looking at the schools, you know, they've got their own thing going on, but, you know, what kind of community do we want? We want good kids, smart kids, and sometimes that's what you do. You have to pay a little bit more there in order to make that happen. But it was a pleasure. I've been doing this about 5 years, and 4 years it wasn't quite as pleasant, but this year it was pretty good. But and thank you for the turnout. This is great. I wish we'd get these for every meeting, because that's really where, you know, people come at the end, so to speak, because they're not really sure what's going on all along, and it's really good to see people in the seats, more so than just watching it on TV, because you can ask questions now, and you can help even direct things if you think of something that is going to help us in the process that we follow. So I just commend the board, and I commend especially Scott, who's done a great job this year. And thanks for coming out, and we're going to keep working at it and get things back where they should be in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Mike. All right, with that, I'll open it to any public comments. Reminder, please, if you have a question or a comment, approach the microphone, state your name, and if we'll happily hear from you.
It's going to be real quick. Elaine Belkis, Beach Hill Road. Scott, could you take a couple of minutes and explain to the group here the percentage of nonprofits in our town and that impact on us?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we have 1,800 properties that pay taxes in the town of Plymouth. Above and beyond that, 52% of the properties in the town of Plymouth are tax exempt and nonprofit. That's why we felt the importance of going out and surveying those nonprofit and tax exempt properties throughout the town, having conversations with them, surveying their properties. I'll give you an example of one that was surveyed, was Midstate Health up on Boulder Point. So they're tax exempt nonprofit, but if you go to Midstate, you notice they have a pharmacy in there. That portion of the building is taxable property because they are for-profit. So those are the types of things we picked up through doing the survey, through doing the analysis, and having our consultants, Whitney Consultants, go out and do these visits. But 52% of the property in the town of Plymouth is tax exempt nonprofit, which means 48% of us pay the operating cost in the budget that's appropriated.
Please.
20 years ago, we negotiated a settlement with the college. At the time, it was a college. And they were going to pay for a code enforcement officer and some other things. What are they paying now, and how are they paying it?
Yeah, please, Scott.
So currently, last fall, we negotiated with the university. They paid $400,000 a year in a pilot agreement, payment in lieu of taxes. In addition to that, they pay for additional fire, EMS, and police services. As well, they pay full taxes on the Citizens Bank building right up here on Highland Street. So overall last year, and this is approximate, John, not an exact figure, they paid about $1.2 million back to the town in taxes or in lieu of taxes.
Well, that's good. That's probably better than we thought it was going to be. Tell me, if there's a doctor's office, you can tax that, can't you?
It depends if the physician is part of the organization that's nonprofit or tax exempt.
But if he's a physician himself.
If it's a private physician's office, it's taxable property if they own a building and have that, yes.
Because I thought that if there were doctors' offices in a building like a Midstate, but that you could tax that portion of it.
If they're not associated with the tax exempt nonprofit organization.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Cheryl Bernard. I'm
owner at 140 Davis Road, which is Tenny Mountain. And I have questions regarding the reevaluations because my tax bill went up 72% for this one time. So I looked online today. I looked at other properties that were similarly square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. And they were significantly less, although more, I'm sure, than they were last year. But so my tax bill went from $1,700 first quarter to $4,600 this past bill that just got paid. As I said, other properties that had, so example one, so mine is a 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 1,300 square feet. It's not large. The tax bill now is $5,868 per year. I looked at another property, it was 1,850 square feet, so larger, had 8 total rooms, mine has 4, 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, average condition, same as mine. Assessed of the building value was $187,000. Mine is $240,000. I just can't understand such a huge discrepancy for those two properties. I have no land, so the land value is 0. The building value is $240,000. We have private roads, so we don't use the service. There's no public service for that. Just in my building alone, if you add up the assessed values for one building, there would be $1.6 million, and it seems very disproportionate to what the other. I looked up multiple other examples. There's another property, 2,000 square foot property, 9 total rooms, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Average building assessment was $179,300. Again, mine is smaller by far, and it's 2/3 more. So that's, like I said, my value went up 72%. So from the past 5 years, it was $108,300. It jumped to $240,700, and that's for everybody in my building. The end unit is actually a little more. It was like $249,000 because I think the end unit must be a little bigger.
So when we started the reevaluation process, and in my opinion, and something we'll be working with the board, is that in a town such as Plymouth, with such a high volume of tax-exempt nonprofit properties, a 5-year reevaluation really doesn't make sense for the town of Plymouth. We should be doing a full update every other year. So we're catching the market when it increases, we're catching the market when it decreases. But even furthermore than that, when we do the reevaluation process, we do it in accordance with the Department of Revenue Administration. This whole reevaluation process is guided by the state of New Hampshire through the Department of Revenue Administration under Chapter 7, which outlines the rules and regulations and oversight that DRA has over the town of Plymouth through the reevaluation process. So when we start this, we meet with DRA, and they assign us 2 assessors that provide complete oversight of the reevaluation process. That means they come, they check, they look, they visit the different properties, pulling them randomly to see what properties they're gonna go look at. And based on that process, that's where the reevaluation numbers come from. I'll ask, did you set up a meeting with the assessing department to review your new assessment?
Did I?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
No.
So there is that opportunity once the assessments come out. But even now, if you're unhappy with the assessment that you have had on your property, you have the opportunity to file for an abatement.
No, I understand that, but I mean, a 72% increase
It's
is
the-
more than extraordinary. I mean, it's
I-
not reasonable.
I understand it, but it's what the market is showing in the town of Plymouth and across the state of New Hampshire. But with your comparisons that you have, which will support your abatement, when you file for that abatement, you'll come in and make your case and present that. Those are the things you need to bring in to show what you're saying. It's not reasonable. But the whole process of reevaluation is that we have to comply with the state of New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration. That's the same with setting the tax rate. We, the town of Plymouth, don't set the tax rate. We provide the Department of Revenue Administration all of our financials that come from our auditing firm, which was done in October. Those numbers are transmitted over to the Department of Revenue Administration. Ann and I sit in a call with Department Administration, and they take our numbers, and they give us the tax rate. We, the town of Plymouth, don't set that tax rate. The tax rate is set based on our appropriations, our revenues, our expenses, our credits are all taken into consideration, and the Department of Revenue Administration sets our tax rate.
When you were going over the budget earlier, though, how, if my tax bill and everybody I'm just saying in those condominiums went up 72%, and other people here have said they've gone up 20%, right? 72%, 70%, 20%, 20%.
The typical single-family home went up 50 to 65%, the typical. And as Zach said during his initial opening, is that the commercial market did not see the increase that single-family homes, multifamily homes saw. The reason being is that they saw a higher assessment back in 2017-18. So they didn't peak as much as the single-family home market. The market is all built off of the real estate market of what we're seeing not only in New Hampshire, New England, and across the country. And typically, what our assessing department is telling us, and from those municipal managers that I communicate with on a daily basis, the market scored from 50 to 85% in single-family homes.
I know that, but if you're bringing this much more revenue, right? 72% from all of the people that I'm aware of, which is I don't know, there's 10 buildings, 6 units, there's 60 right there, 72% plus all the other people. Where's all this extra money? And isn't it unreasonable? Is there no sense of reasonableness between a jump? So you can say, oh, well, we should have done it 3 years ago and then it wouldn't be so much. But to jump somebody's taxes by 72% in 1 year is really just seems not fair, not reasonable, not anything that somebody could budget for.
Remember that when we started the presentation last year at town meeting, the budget that was voted on and appropriated showed a $2.47 increase per thousand. Okay? Which you recognize
But
in your
the
December.
reevaluation,
Oh, but you
right.
recognize that in the second bill of your tax, which comes out in December. So you pay that difference, that increased difference in December. So when you pay your first bill next year, the total tax bill will be divided in two. And hopefully your second bill next year will be decreased by the budget that we'll be voting on in March of 2024 for the new budget with a decrease of $1.24 per thousand valuation in property taxes.
still went from $3,400 to $5,800.
I'm sorry,
It
what's
went
it?
from $3,400 to $5,868.
As did mine,
You said yours went 20%. This is 72.
23% actually.
72 is not the same. 72 is
Well,
not
my
the same.
taxes increased by 23%.
My tax increased by 72%.
Just to break in, you asked about where does the additional revenue go? There isn't additional revenue. We still generate the same amount of revenue. What happens in the reevaluation when single-family homes values go up and commercial values stay the same, then single-family home owners pay more of the taxes, more of the overall proportion of the taxes than they did previously. So commercial real estate is paying, after the reevaluation, is paying less on their taxes while single-family homeowners are paying more. And that's the math of how the reevaluation worked out. We don't have the ability to say we'll adjust the rates for one or the other. This is how much money the town has voted to appropriate. This is the valuation of the properties, and then that cost gets distributed to the taxpayers. So I understand your concern. I think you definitely, if you think that yours is incorrect, you should come in and get an appointment with somebody to deal with your individual issue. I just wanted to make sure that you understood the broader macro problem. It's not like your taxes went up 70% and suddenly the town had 70% more revenue. For your 70% increase, Walmart paid less money, right? That's the balance.
Great. That makes it so much better. Thanks, though.
It's the reality.
She has, you have until March 1st to apply for an abatement.
Just a quick note, if anybody is seeking an abatement or trying to talk to the town about their particular situation, the deadline on that's March 1st. So make sure you get an appointment and you get in to talk to somebody in the town if you do feel like your taxes are incorrectly assessed.
Yes, I'm Sandy Hauser. I'm up in Tenny Mountain. I only have 1,000 square feet, and my taxes have been increased to $5,096. I'm saying, I understand your 20%, or 72, and my almost 100%. Why? Why the difference of 20% and her 72? On our tax bill, every time we get it says assessed valuation. We assume that you guys, whoever you hire, are out there assessing us. And, you know, every year we get these tax bills. But to go in such a degree like that, to go from one level, 20% for you, 72 for her, 94,000, mine went from 94,000 assessed to 207, same 1,000 square feet, that's it. All in one tax bill.
The problem, ma'am, is that you wouldn't be able to buy your house for $100,000 now because the market has changed.
I understand that. I understand the market changing, but to go up to such a degree, and why 20% for, why 20% for you? That I just don't understand. And we're not talking about that the town is making more money on us. We're talking about how it was assessed, that it was maybe assessed incorrectly. And we need to, and why should, due respect, all respect, please. Why should we go out and try to figure out what everybody around has paid for their assessed value? Why should we be the ones under this abatement form that we have to go out and prove when it's there written in black and white? Why do we have to do that?
I fully understand your concern, and my taxes went up 23. My assessment went up almost 80%.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Mine 100.
But this is done under strict guidance of the Department of Revenue Administration. It's nothing that we're doing here to assess your properties. It's all based on the market value of real estate. And we, like I said, it's complete oversight by the state that comes in and looks at and signs off on the total reevaluation that was done for the town. So I understand your concerns, but it's nothing the town has control over.
And when we file this abatement application, who determines that we're eligible? Is it the town that determines it, or does it go back to
The Board of Selectmen determined the abatements.
here in the town?
That's
right.
correct.
So the Board of Selectmen, in consultation with our appraisers.
So then you have the right to then lower and give us back an abatement, yet you don't have the right, as you say, to assess us.
Well, so we contract with somebody to do the assessment for the whole town,
Yes.
right? The select board, we don't go out and look at everybody's individual properties and figure out what they're worth. We hire experts to do that work, and they look at the various properties in town, and they, look at what the real estate market is, and they determine, what these properties are valued at in the current market. And I will say, we've been talking about single-family homes. There are different kinds of single-family homes. A condominium in this market went up more. Manufactured housing went up more. So even though, single-family housing is single-family housing and all of that went up, some of the least expensive housing in our town, in our state, in our region has been hit the hardest by the real estate market. So, a mobile home that maybe 3 years ago you could have bought pre-pandemic, 4 years ago, you could have bought for $50,000, $60,000. Those mobile homes are now selling for $120,000, $130,000, right? So the market did that. It's pretty extreme.
It's pretty extreme, and that's another thing that I want to mention, that why aren't we assessed more often then? Why should we wait?
That's exactly what we're
I
intending
wanna
to
do.
do. We're going to start assessing every 2 years.
The other thing that I think is important is that I review all of the property transfers in the town of Plymouth through the Grafton County Registry of Deeds. I can tell you in November and in December, there were, every property transfer that was done sold for 30 to 40% above the new assessed value. I can tell you a property in the town of Plymouth that just sold at the owners bought it 4 years ago for $289,000. The property was reassessed at $399,000. They just signed a purchase and sale agreement for $549,000. That's what drives the market. But I will tell you, and like I said when I began, is that we will look at a full update every other year so we can catch the market before we see the swing.
That's
with
really
the bass.
important. Maybe that's what we should put down in our abatement application. That we were wrongly assessed in the manner that we were assessed. Does that make sense? Sorry about that. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So similar to other people here, I think a lot of the questions.
Name
center-
first, sir.
Oh yeah, Will Bond. I live on Old Hebron Road. I think there still is some kinks to work out in terms of the actual assessment process. I've met, sent emails, called Scott, and I still haven't gotten a call back or a reply since September about my appraisal. So I'm actually concerned about appraisals happening every 2 years if we can't figure out a process where in 4 months you can reply to the info that I provided. But I think the bigger, all that aside, we can talk about individual cases all day long. What I hear is the percentage that we're getting, we keep on selling our properties in town to nonprofits, or nonprofits can pay more money for properties than other people, so they are purchasing more land and more taxable houses or buildings in our town, and thus are increasing the percentage of our tax base. Thus, the remaining single, individuals who own properties here is decreasing. Now, the market is now squeezing where commercial properties are going down and single family values are going up. So we're being squeezed on both sides. My question is, what levers do we have on the macro scale to counteract that? Can we apply taxes to extra taxes to non-resident owned buildings to try to affect students who are living at PSU? Like, we have 52% of our town is now occupied largely by non-tax paying entities. Like, if we keep on squeezing, everybody here is just gonna move out, right? And then everybody who's left is gonna get squeezed and squeezed more, right? And it's going to actually, so we're gonna get into a worse place. We're gonna continue getting into a worse place unless something changes on the macro scale. And so my question to you is, because I'm not an expert in this, what are the levers we can turn on the macro scale? Because we have to turn those levers somehow, because right now, all it's doing is squeezing all these individual taxpayers for more and more money. I mean, everybody, like, all of our taxes are going up thousands of dollars in the past year, and our budget's going down. So how do we counteract that? We either need to do less as a town and just say, you know what, we're not going to do X, Y, Z. We just can't, right? Because we can't afford it. Or we have to enforce, or we have to affect change so that we can actually say, hey, all you nonprofits, it's great that your shareholders aren't profiting. All of your employees are making money. You're using up all the services in the town, and things like that. So how do we get there? And that's where I need to hear from you. And so maybe there aren't any levers right now. What's the next step? Do we go to the State House and get levers enacted? And so if so, should we be spending our time talking about that instead of arguing over the little details of what our assessment is here?
So a couple things. I wish you had followed up with me, Will, because we had a conversation, very open, very transparent. And if you hadn't heard back from our assessing company, I wish you would have followed up with me, because I can assure that you will.
Yeah, I believe you. And I want to say you've been doing a great job of this. Every time I've talked to you about anything in the town over the past 2 years, you've always followed up. So my point is just that I think that that comment was just saying that the response is, oh, did you make an appointment? Did you do all these things? Even when we do those things, sometimes it doesn't happen. So I think there's still kinks to be worked out in the assessment beyond doing it more often. Like, I don't know if, like, we didn't have enough people assigned by the DRA. Is that something that they choose or we choose, or did they hire the wrong company that didn't have enough staffing to do this? Because something doesn't seem quite right.
So on your second part of your question,
Yeah.
is that last year, there was Senate Bill 84 that was introduced into the Senate to hopefully get nonprofits to pay in lieu of taxes.
Okay.
Selectman Bolton testified, I testified, and it never made it to the Senate to vote. It was thrown out. There are such large lobbying groups with regards to the hospital associations, the mental health associations, that come in and lobby against that. It never made it to the floor, but we were there trying to push it. This year, there's legislation to try to have churches pay in lieu of taxes. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but I'm guessing it's probably going to have the same result as Senate Bill 84, which didn't even make it to the floor to vote. So we have tried through the legislative process, and we will continue to try. The other thing is I continue to meet with nonprofits and have a conversation with them, but there is nothing that requires them to pay anything. I will tell you that we have 6 or 7 pilot agreements in place that we've been able to negotiate with some of the nonprofits in towns, but that's a very small percentage.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah.
And we need to continue to work on that, which I pledged that I will do. But that's where we sit with regards to legislations, bills being introduced, and how the process works.
Right. So as citizens, if we want to, like, do we need to mobilize 1,000 of us to show up in the State House to, like, make it, like, there has to be
I would say definitively yes.
Okay, so
I
what
think
can we do as, like, a
nonprofits
town
and-
to help, like,
in the state education, because they're technically under a different provision than nonprofits, so the universities, their requirements, there's a specific call out in the RSA for the university system of New Hampshire with no cap on their tax exempt status. Holderness Prep School is an educational facility, and they can claim a certain amount of nonprofit, but then there's a cap. I think it's $250,000. So they get $250,000 of relief, and after that, now they got to pay. If something like that was done to the university system, everything that we deal with in this town would suddenly get that much easier. But as Scott said, the interest in doing that at the state level has been limited. And I think the only way that changes is if people stand up and say, we can't have it this way. This state, we get the vast majority of our funding from property taxes. And if you make all of these organizations tax exempt, well, then it's us that have to carry the bill, and that's tough.
right, yeah. So, and by no means is my comments here directed, like, I appreciate, going to the town meetings each year. I appreciate all the details and the effort that go into these. It just seems like, we're like fighting over like pennies here. And there's like this these big organizations, companies and nonprofits who are just like hoarding, obscene amounts of money and are just like, yeah, we're not going to give any of that to you to kind of like keep the town that we actually reside in running. So is there anything that we can do as a town to help organize around or communicate around making legislation happen, right? Should we be investing a little bit of money in organizing some sort of group to try to make some sort of difference at the state level?
Neil wanted to say, so I've been holding him off.
In another vein, I'd like to say that our planning department, our planning board, zoning board, conservation commission have all been collaborating and working diligently to approve projects, commercial projects that are going to contribute a great deal to our tax base. We've got a new Hilton Hotel, all shovel ready to go out on Tenny Mountain Highway, and we've got a very large project at Tenny Mountain Ski Area, all shovel ready to go. All the engineering's done, all the permits have been issued, and there's been a lot of diligent collaboration by these departments and boards to continue this process of enhancing our commercial base in our community. And that's going to make a big difference.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, please, Bill.
Just to follow up on the bill that Scott was mentioning, Senate Bill 84, and I represent the towns of Plymouth, Ashland, and Holderness, and Sue Prentice and I partnered on that bill that was sent over to the Senate. And that bill was actually just to establish a study committee for a year to look at the effect of nonprofits and the possibility of like a pilot in lieu of taxes. And that study committee didn't fly because, as Scott mentioned, larger groups, specifically the Hospital Association, hospitals feel that they've done enough community service that they don't want to be threatened by a pilot bill. Regardless, that bill got burned and trashed. So next session, I assume it might be an easier, perhaps, environment with the House and the Senate, and we'll have a new governor. And I'll be submitting a bill on the House side and specifically targeting a percentage that nonprofits, should be accountable for a payment in lieu of taxes. And I think if we can get like towns upset enough or engaged enough, and Plymouth isn't the only town that has this issue, then we could have a successful bill. But,
Thank you.
thank you.
Scott, for the audience, could you talk a little bit about how an organization gets tax exempt status?
I don't have the
Do we
information
make the
in front-
determination, or does somebody else?
I can address that. Hi, my name is Mary Joyce, and I'm a property owner on Fairgrounds Road. To become a nonprofit in New Hampshire, you have to file for 501c3 status with the IRS. And in order to do that, you have to create a board of directors and go through this long process. But in the end, all a nonprofit, they do such great work, and I've always worked for nonprofits, but it is a tax status. It doesn't mean that they don't make profits. And that's the thing people don't really understand. I think sometimes they think nonprofits equals no money, and that's not the case. So I would be very interested in being part of a citizens committee to go to the state bill, and I'll give you my number after the meeting. And
I think I have it, Mary.
gentlemen, I think we need to sort of revolt a little bit on a state level. I think you guys are all doing a great job, and I think it really does come down to the state to help the towns. So, thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Please.
Katie Badalak. Bill Bolton, the Senate bill, whatever the number was.
84.
that, was put together. You said, I know you guys testified, did towns like Keene and Durham also, were they involved? Did they collaborate? Because that would be very important, I would think.
No, I don't think it was like well represented. I think it really had no advocates that really were out there for us. So I think if we just basically gather some advocates and kind of have an equal footing than people that are against it that repeatedly throw a lot of money at legislators like hospital associations and such. So I think next time it'll be not just one person standing there.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm a nurse, so I understand the hospitals and their, fiscal crunches. I don't know if a carve out, because they can't pay their providers enough also because of state rules on Medicaid and federal rules on Medicare. So they're getting squeezed too. But in education, I know that is it the state of New Hampshire is like 49th in the country in terms of money that the state puts towards
For higher education.
For higher
they're
education.
50 out of 50.
Yeah, so I'm sure
They
that's
could double their revenue and they would still be 50 out of 50.
So I'm sure they think that they are a protected class. But, I mean, so even if there was, this is just an idea, even if there was some kind of special carve-out for hospitals and or education, we still have a lot of other nonprofits. And as Mary just addressed, you know, that doesn't mean that there isn't some money more money that could be shared, but mostly I'm thinking, like Scott said, there's no enforcement mechanism. So great for the 6 or 7 nonprofits that are paying something, but the rest of them are like, you know, I don't know, but there's no way to enforce it. So that's a large group that we're not getting any kind of payment for. So thank you to the gentleman who, you know, addressed this, and Mary for her explanation, because if 52% of our properties are non-taxable, no wonder we're hurting the single-family homeowners. Thank you.
I just want to, in fairness to Spear Memorial Hospital, they do enter into a pilot agreement with the town of Plymouth. So in all fairness to Spear, both on Highland Street and out at Boulder Point, they do contribute towards a pilot agreement with the town of Plymouth.
What's Midstate contribute?
Midstate is still under that current agreement that was signed 4 years ago, which expires on the 25th of what they pay.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Henry Ahern, Daniel Webster Highway in Plymouth, where the deer are. I just want to kind of start off and address a couple of things. Number one, I understand the difference between assessment and the taxes. Like you said at the start, all things being equal, the assessment, I don't care if my house is worth $1 million or goes up to $1 million, if what I'm actually paying in taxes stays roughly the same. Unfortunately, this year, in our final bill, the taxes didn't stay anywhere close to the same. And that was what the real hurt was. I had a piece of property that's sitting on the river, was just underwater here a couple weeks ago, doubled in price, in value, and it's nothing. So my taxes went up significantly. With that said, I've had a couple people have asked, what can we do about the taxes? I stand up at town meeting, all of you have seen me stand up at town meeting and ask people to stop spending so much money. That's what it takes, is everybody to go to town meeting, and when this warrant articles come up, cut it by 10%, cut it by 15%. And I tried to do that last year, and nobody wanted to work with me to cut it, and that's why your tax bills are what they are, is because we spent that money. So the way to stop it is, just like we have to do at home, stop spending the money. Okay, so now I'll just go to a few questions I've got. I got that off my chest. Sorry, everybody. How much property in the town over the last year, the valuation, has been transferred from commercial paying property, taxable property, to nonprofits? Do we have any number on what it was? I mean, the Community Savings Bank was...
That was a couple years ago. I know Little Antlers, the child care facility out on Tenny Mountain Highway, that one is newly moved to nonprofit status.
I would say the two we have is Little Antlers on Tenny Mountain Highway and the new Midstate facility here on the Main Street.
Those are the two
have been the only two in the last couple of years, Henry.
How about the Armory?
I'm sorry, what's
Armory
that?
purchasing land.
Oh, the Armory, but that was 4 years ago they bought that land, 5 years? It's been a bit.
So we are still getting too much land transferred.
The university has slowed down on its land purchase over the last few years, which is
They've already
just been
taken
good.
over
Yeah.
so much of the town. Do you have anybody know what the evaluation came up, the assessment was for the college properties that they own in this town? We
I'd
have a
to look
number
it up
on
and
that?
Get it back to you. I don't have it in front of me now.
Okay, that would be an interesting, I appreciate the fact that Plymouth State University is paying something in lieu of taxes, but it should be more with all the dorms. Those are residences, same as my resident, and they should be paying something on those. One suggestion that I have was, we have so many nonprofits in this town that service the other towns around us. Our ambulance goes out, the town gets a bill for the ambulance. The patients come in and go to Mid-State from outside the town, and we get nothing for it. And we're paying for it. I really think that there should be some mechanism that these nonprofits might say, like Whole Village up there, say, well, we have 100 clients from Ashland and 100 clients from Holderness. Then the town of Holderness or the town of Ashland should be supporting us on those. None of those other towns around us have as many nonprofits. Some of them have churches, but beyond the churches, there are very few services in all that town, all those towns, and the town of Plymouth supports all those towns. And I think there should be some way to recoup that money. Okay? And I was going to go through some of the assessments of the nonprofits and what they're paying in lieu of taxes. I'm glad, Scott, you're continuing to work on getting the nonprofits to pay something. The other side of that, though, how many of those nonprofits do we have a warrant article for to give them money? And I was trying to find it in the budget.
It's actually very few at this point. And let me address that one directly, because we, over the last couple of years, we took a very intentional move to sort of carve down that line. So these days, and if we look specifically on page, which is it, 13, 14? Oh, here it is. If you look at line 543 on page 12.
I was scurrying trying to find it.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a little tricky to find everything in here. So 543, you can see, so there's two different budget sections that have nonprofits in them. One is the health agency, so Pemmy-Baker Community Health Agency and Lakes Region Mental Health. So those are two. And then if you go to line 554 on the next page, you can see this is the remainder of them, and those include, excuse me, those include Transport Central, Grafton County Senior Citizens, Tri-County Community Action, Voices Against Violence, the Red Cross, Pemmy Youth Center, Katie, CASA, Court Appointed Child Advocacy, and Pemmy Bridge House.
Okay, thank you. That brings up another suggestion that I have. I would say that these nonprofits that are not paying anything in lieu of taxes do not get anything out of, give them $1 just to show we support, and take the rest of the money out. They're not paying anything in taxes and they're not supporting us. And so that would be one of the savings where we might save some money, would be my suggestion. All right, on another note, done with the nonprofits. Chief, how many vehicles does the police department have now?
I believe we have
10? 10? Fire chief?
Yes, sir.
Yes, less the fire engines themselves, how many vehicles does the fire department have?
We have 2 command vehicles, the building inspector has a vehicle that's probably 10 years old, and a pickup.
4? I just remember back when I was a police officer in the 80s.
Long time ago.
Well, long time ago, I understand. But unfortunately, the same number of people are paying taxes in this town. Actually, less of us now paying taxes in this town. Okay? When I was a policeman, part-time policeman, we had 2 cruisers. One was either 1 year old or 2 years old, and the other one is either 3-year-old or 4-year-old. We got a cruiser every 2 years. 2 cruisers. That was all. Same number of policemen.
How many calls did you respond to in a week's time during
We
that
were
period?
responding to lots of calls.
700? Probably not.
I would have to go back and look, but a fair number of
I will
calls.
tell you, the call volume has increased drastically in the types of services that both of these departments are providing.
I'm not arguing with
Well,
you.
I'm countering your point.
Okay.
Because there's a need for additional vehicles, detectives, investigators, patrolmen, EMTs, advanced EMTs,
Parking
paramedics.
attendants, the guys, the traffic director at the school, okay? There's, seems to be an excess in vehicles. But going on, I mean, we had vehicle every 2 years. The fire department got the old vehicle for 1. And so that was, just looking at the number of vehicles concerns me with the number of people that are driving around. I'll let the rest of it go. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Ahern.
Henry.
I just want to give a little clarification about the process for the nonprofits. I am also on that committee. And what we do, we have a pretty intense questionnaire that people have to fill out and the information they give us. Part of it is we look at how many people from Plymouth do you actually serve? And we base what we decide somewhat on that. We don't want to pay for anybody else other than Plymouth. And we make it very clear. We also look at properties. We see if they put in new curbing and they built, all these things going on. And there have been times when we've said, you know what, they got to be making money somewhere. So we're not going to give them more. And actually, we've cut back on the nonprofits over the last 2 years in particular. And some of this nonprofit stuff I think is a boon to the elderly we have in town. I mean, we have to provide some, but in terms of providing for other towns, that's not coming through the nonprofits. We're not taking in Ashland, we're not taking in Rumney, we're not taking in Campton, we're taking in just Plymouth people. And we investigate the numbers, because sometimes numbers aren't always accurate. So we get out and ask a lot of questions to make sure that we're serving the people of Plymouth in terms of the nonprofits. So I don't know, Plymouth's always been kind of the hub, and for better or for worse. And there are things we provide that, I think are good, but it's the property taxes that aren't paid in lieu of, which is really the tough part. And I think we got to go big picture. I think the gentleman in the back that spoke very, very well, and I think it's got to be an action by citizens to go tell our representatives and anyone else that'll listen to us about what we need to do. And that's the only way it's going to happen. Because otherwise, you've got your lobbyists and you've got your dark money and all those sort of things that support things that we don't even know about. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify, Henry, for that on what we do in the nonprofits. And thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
So regarding nonprofits, I happen to be the executive director of a nonprofit, and actually Transport Central is the #1 nonprofit that we receive Plymouth monies from. And I get some monies. Actually, we get a lot of federal funds as well. But and we transport elderly over 60 or anyone with disabilities or any service member, and we do that for free with volunteer drivers. But still, we incur a lot of costs that need to be made up by the towns that we serve. And getting back to Henry's thing, so we go around, actually usually at the invitation of the town that we serve, to determine how we benefit that town. And we basically get a lot of reimbursement in that manner. But I really am intrigued by your suggestion that we just go to the towns directly as far as what towns we serve, to what extent, and then the nonprofits would bill them. We at least we are we're replaced actually in the whole village. And we serve 19 towns. And the offices in Whole Village also serve 19 towns, the same towns that we serve. So I would be very intrigued by pursuing that, as far as like going after the towns that we serve on a larger fashion than what we do. But anyway, thank you.
Before I take, and I will get to you 100%, I just wanted to do a quick check to see if there's anybody on Zoom who was interested in speaking. All right, not seeing any. I'll take you now.
Thank you. I'm not a resident of Plymouth, but I am, as Bill is, I'm an executive director of one of the nonprofits, Grafton County Senior Citizens Council. So I just want to add our perspective on the very interesting conversation. So we greatly appreciate the support from the town. We serve people of every town in Grafton County, and we do ask for funding from every town in Grafton County. Generally about 5 to 10% of our cost to provide services is what we ask for. So to give you an example for Plymouth, we serve 62% of residents age 60 or older receive some type of service from us. We don't charge. Every single thing that we offer is free. We accept donations, but there is no charge. And the cost for us to provide services for only Plymouth residents, it's more than $350,000. So we're asking for 4% of that from the town, $17,000. So thank you for your consideration. I just wanted to add that perspective.
Thank you. What was your name? I'm sorry, we didn't catch it for the record.
Kathleen Vasconcelos.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Frank Miller, and I'm on several committees, and one is the Economic Development Committee. But in doing a review of the master plan of the town of Plymouth and looking at our facilities, I would say that a lot of these departments are running under requirements of federal laws, state laws, for which this Board of Selectmen and the agencies themselves have no authority except to comply, part of which requires certain configurations and conditions of the buildings they operate out of and the equipment and services they provide. And a lot of that in the last 10 years has grown substantially. If you keep track of the laws that become effective January 1 of every year by the state, of compliance issues that each town is obligated to comply. There's no discussion, no negotiation. This is the new law, codes, or standard of which you will operate. And it's in the interest of the public safety and quality of life of the citizens of the state of New Hampshire, even though you may challenge it. But the department heads and this Board of Selectmen don't get to pick and choose. They have to say, we are obligated to comply. And a lot of our facilities in this town, out of date, out of code, and incomplete. And a lot of the equipment and services they provide are very expensive because a lot of it requires specialized training, recertification, and then continued maintenance of very expensive equipment. And these gentlemen here, the ladies and gentlemen here are working on our behalf, but I have to say that a lot of it is by government agencies, the federal government agencies, and or state agencies or industry agencies that set that standard, and that we're between that rock and a hard place. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Phil Steinkraus, Brookside Drive. First question comes from my ignorance. The other big contributor to the overall tax rate was school. I take it the town has no say in that. That's the state?
It's not the state. So there are local school boards. So the elementary school has a school board that that has a similar process to this with open hearings about their budget. And then the high school's a regional high school.
Okay.
So there's a regional board for that. And similarly, they do open hearings for theirs, and then we get assessed a component of that based on both our assessed value of our town and the number of students in the school.
Okay, so there is some give and take between the town and the schools to figure.
We have no, as a board of selectmen, we are completely independent of them and them
Okay.
of us. But you have a right to go to those budget hearings and speak on
All right.
those costs. Yes.
And my other question is, what other areas of revenue might you consider? We look at a neighboring town with these wind turbines. I mean, I don't know what kind of revenue that generates for them. An unusual one that stuck in my head was a town in Rhode Island was considering allowing a casino to be put there, and existing casinos were willing to pay that town money not to allow it. So again, just kind of thinking out of the box. I don't want to turn this into a casino town, but sometimes the threat of something is more powerful than actually doing it.
Now that's thinking outside the box.
Just taking it from my wife's threats.
On the topic of the wind turbines, we, as a town, we did vote in to build a solar array last year, which, we're still going through some of the permitting and those sorts of things. But once that's installed, it actually will reduce some of our costs in town in terms of power.
Nice.
So that will be a revenue generating initiative.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call for Zoom.
Zach, if I may?
Yeah, Scott, please.
I really appreciate the turnout tonight. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to know that you care about the town of Plymouth and that you're willing to provide input to myself, the board. It's important, is that we don't typically get this input, and what we're hearing from you tonight and what I'm hearing a lot of is over-assessing, over reevaluation, over the budget. And like Zach said before, we did all we could from the start of this budget season to make sure that we were going to lower the tax rate as we went into this next town meeting. So again, please do come to town meeting. We have our second budget hearing on February 8th. We'll be reading the warrant articles at that time. Zach covered a lot of what's going to be included in there. But again, thank you for your attendance. I am always available. If you call me, I assure you I will call you back that same day. If you come visit me, I will assure you that my door is open and we can sit and have a conversation. So, thank you for attending tonight. I truly appreciate it.
Can I have the last word?
Elaine, you had the last word last Sunday.
I want to thank you, Scott. You people probably don't even know this. I live on Beach Hill Road, on the corner of Beach Hill and Brookside Drive. And everybody in my neighborhood, like all of us here tonight, got our tax bills. It went through the roof. So what we did is we met as a neighbor, as a whole neighborhood. We said, okay, let's meet at my house. Let's talk about this. I used to be on town boards in a past life, so I kind of get a little bit of how things go. I invited Scott to come. It was a long weekend. It was last Sunday or the Sunday before. Everybody has Monday off. And I invited him to come to my house on a Sunday afternoon, and he came.
They lured me with food.
He made it a special thing. He wouldn't eat it, but that's okay. But my point is, in all my years of living in different towns and being on different town boards and being involved, I've never, ever had a town manager that came to my house on a Sunday afternoon to talk about all this stuff. So thank you. Thank you for going above and beyond what you have to do. I just totally appreciate it.
And like I always say,
Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, like I always say, it's open, honest, and transparent communications that makes this community come together and work. So I am here. to ask any questions of, anytime, just call.
All right, anything else from the board?
I'm good.
All right, 7:01, I will close the public hearing. We do have a few more agenda items to plow through, but we'll give the crowd a moment to clear out a little bit.
Hey, on that note, and if I take a brief recess?
Hey, Ted. Marcy still here?
Thank you. Good job.
I will get you.
I remember you too. Oh, she's doing great.
Give me
Yeah.
money.
In fact, she's like. In fact, we went for a walk this morning and stuff. But
Not yet.
she hasn't really riding her bike too
You
much. But
wanna
she's
stay
got
for-
skis now. Cross country skis. So we're gonna be doing that. Also, like hiking a lot. She's doing like a lot of mountains
A good half an hour, if not 40 minutes.
now than she was before. Yeah.
You got mine? That's all I'm gonna say.
I don't have.
Take a little, I'll just drive through.
She really worked hard to.
And how many?
Zach?
Just too close, Sarah.
Zach?
Hey, so Mary, I've got like a 536 number for you, and I don't think that's one.
Zach,
And I
want
have
to recess for 5 minutes?
Yeah, just put it like I was thinking a couple notes there.
We're doing a 5-minute recess.
My email,
Okay.
and I can give you my mobile number.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Bunch of us? Yeah.
603.
You're not gonna run from us. No, if there's a criminal behind you, we're gonna go get it.
I'm like the biggest nonprofit. I mean, my whole career's a nonprofit, but and it's not. And you know what it is? It's so, as you know, I didn't want to get into all that, but the nonprofit circuit, the state doesn't.
That's it.
That's it, right? So
And
that's
if
really
we don't do it as nonprofits, then people
When I first started here, I'd get the copy.
right. Exactly.
seem to be in a
but
good
it's just a
mood.
matter of like somehow
Seem
getting
to be in a
everything.
good mood.
Now it's like.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, really.
Well, there's paper.
no-brainer as far as we're concerned,
Right.
because you get this
Yeah,
like
yeah.
every year.
Mary Ann, Zach, you guys want water?
I think there's a whole group of people that will.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Ann.
Guys, Gary.
No, I didn't get it.
So his name is Will Bond. And
Well, now it's not that. Now it's people that don't want to go to court.
Very helpful.
I know. I'm gonna ask him to come up and give you a minute. Hold on.
Well, so obviously you knew, and you know town meeting's gonna, the same question. Right, right.
Did a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, just cut everything 10-15%.
Right.
Hey, I know one thing. When you go in the State House, it's hardball.
Thank you.
It's real hardball.
Of course, I have to get voted back in.
In there, I know.
Right.
Get voted back in.
Great guy.
See, otherwise, no tax cuts. We have to vote.
What's your success rate?
What, are getting voted in?
No, getting tax cuts is all.
Great.
I was just almost done with my coffee.
He was a very, so when I was growing up.
Right. Yep.
Now the pressure on with your wife. She wants 25 minutes.
Right?
Yeah. Resume again.
Fix my truck and then if you want be stuck.
All right, let's go. Everything.
All right. We're gonna reconvene here. And I think next on the agenda is
Reports.
committee reports. I think, right? We don't have any
Yes.
other
Water and sewer tomorrow night. It's their budget hearing. I don't know how many budget hearings do they have. I know it's their first one. Maybe they only have one. But it is tomorrow night if you're looking for something fun to do.
Thank you.
Planning board?
Planning board, Neil.
Okay, I attended the last planning board meeting.
I don't think you were at the last meeting.
I wasn't?
No, it was
I
last
missed
Thursday.
Oh, last Thursday?
I have an update if you want me to give one.
Go ahead, go for it. Go for it. I was
So-
at the one before.
You were at the one before. Last Thursday, they reviewed the site plan review for Mountain Village Charter School. They provided a notice of decision with stipulations with regards to moving forward with the development. They had a conceptual consultation for Yetton Road development, nine townhouses with 36 units. A gentleman by the name of Craig Francisco. It's a 40-acre parcel of property in the agricultural zone. It was just a consultation on how they were going to set that up. He will be coming back in front of the planning board with additional information. They discussed the subdivision regulations, open space residential development. No decisions were made. They will be holding a next hearing on the proposed zoning amendments on Thursday, February 1st, 2024. And those are the items that were covered in the meeting.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. Campus Community Council is at rest. Yes.
Next meeting, February 5th. Their last meeting was during this meeting.
Oh, right. Yeah. 2 weeks ago.
None of us could attend.
Is community member want to give us an update on what's going on in the elementary school?
They are having their
Microphone.
State your name.
Please.
Sarah Terrell from Plymouth, New Hampshire. They are doing their budget negotiation stuff. Their first draft was up significantly, and the board requested that Tanya and Kyla go back and try and get it closer to 3%. I think they were at 7.4 with the initial draft. So they're looking to make cuts in the next hearing. They'll have the second draft to review.
Thank you. PRHS, they did their budget.
We did report out on them.
We report out on their budget hearing. And then since then, we had another meeting, and they announced they went into private to decide, and then followed up with an announcement of the new principal, which is Janet Eccleston, who's currently the vice principal, will be the new principal at the high school. I don't think there was anything else substantive in that meeting. Conservation Commission, Ted?
Yes. They met on January 11th via Zoom. So they had some technical difficulties with everybody on Zoom, but we got over them. Basically, they postponed the approval of the November minutes. They confirmed there were no budget questions that were raised. They got an update from the Trails Committee. Mike and Greg reported that some PSU students had cleared the ski trails and were planning to check on them with their boards. So that's a good thing. Land stewardship. Greg communicated with Mike McGinley about getting an easement conservation placards for the new Baker River by April 1st. The bridge dedication for Gisela and Paul Estes was discussed to happen by a possible snowshoe hike during February, but the preponderance of the people in the room decided maybe this would be a better summer event, so more people could attend. Let's see, L-CHIP grant. They're looking to get some extra money so they can acquire properties for conservation. Vacation outrates. Michael gave it an update from the planning board probably much akin to what was reported here. Oxbow project, Lisa Donor explains that the conditions and challenges for receiving the LCHIP grant to buy land from a private individual, including surveying, title search, appraisal, easement, and inventory. They did discuss an issue where this company that had bought part of the Oxbow, the water part, some kind of Fowl Group, Inc., I'm not really sure of the name. They bought it and they wanted to make it no trespassing, basically, only for their use. So basically it raised some concerns about public access. And then finally we had a discussion on some property on Tenny Mountain. It's roughly, I think, about 100 acres that was town-owned. And they were talking about access to it from various places so that it could be available for recreation, hiking, or some other purpose. And that pretty much wrapped up the meeting.
Any questions for Ted? Capital improvement is resting for quite some time. LRPC.
We haven't had a meeting, but their executive director, Jeff Hayes, is retiring.
I saw that.
Yeah, and he's going to target like the end of April to actually step down. So there's been a selection committee, set up. I'm not on it, unfortunately, but
Or fortunately.
You got it enough.
yeah. So come April, we'll have a new executive director. And
They're starting the search now so that there'll be like a seamless transition.
Yeah.
All right, Parks and Rec, Ted?
As I can't recall the date, but it's been repeated. We told everyone at a previous meeting that there's a meeting scheduled. I think it's in March from the date. But other than that, no report.
Okay, parking and economic development, we combined them.
Hopefully John Christ, I haven't heard him setting up another meeting, but they just came back from break, so hopefully
Okay.
soon enough.
Energy Commission.
We did have a meeting, and I guess, a lot of it was to finalize the questionnaire that is going to be presented at town.
What questionnaire is that?
There's basically to determine how the Conservation Commission, what they should focus on.
Are you talking about the Energy Commission?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I say conservation?
You did.
I like the Conservation Commission. So that was pretty much the focus, though. And there was a quorum, so.
Any updates on the solar array?
Not at this meeting.
Still waiting on public,
We had
company, right?
we had a bill from them that was not expected to be paid.
Right. So they've run into some supply and demands, and they're not able to get some of the parts that they need. So the project could start either next spring or in October.
Ugh.
So they're in hopes, they're out searching for the equipment that they need in hopes that they'll be able to start in April. But Grace will be here February 12th to give a full update on the project.
Good. No update on ABC because that is at rest. Chamber of Commerce?
Nope, missed the last meeting.
Perlac?
We have a meeting this Thursday.
And we did receive the annual report.
Yeah, that was, when I was chair, I was kind of like obligated just to do the annual report. And then we kind of like lost that. So I think some towns did individual reports on their own. And then what came out of Lakes Region Planning Commission is the combined annual report.
So should that be in our annual report, Bill,
Yeah.
or, okay,
Yeah.
all right. So I
It
made,
used to be, we included it in
Okay.
our annual report, yep.
I did send that on to Colleen today, so it will be included.
Yeah, and, but other towns were doing their own, and I'm thinking, I'm not gonna do one for, maybe I could talk Lisa into it, maybe, but, or Neil. So, yeah, I'm glad it was done and submitted.
Okay.
so.
Police and Fire Building Assessment Committee.
Kevin will be scheduling a meeting over the next few weeks with regards to the last report we received back from the Turner Group.
Okay, good. Did anyone attend the FEMA flood map open house?
No, well, we had a meeting.
Which meeting was
The
that?
FEMA flood map open house?
I did, and there was 6 or 8 representatives from FEMA here, and no representation from the public from any of the surrounding communities.
So it was just you? You were the whole...
I stopped up, and Joseph was here.
Okay.
But there was
He doesn't
no-
live here, you do at
There was
least.
no public comment.
Wasn't that like a snow day? It was cold weather. It was something.
It was something, it was a
Weather.
Thursday night, the 10th?
No, it
Wednesday
was
night.
like
It was a
10
Wednesday
That
night.
was
days.
from 4 to 7.
4 o'clock,
4 to
yeah.
7, yeah.
4 o'clock.
Something like
Because
that.
I had it written on my whiteboard, and there was some reason I didn't go that night.
I think you were snowballing in the driveway.
It sounds possible.
That'll do it.
That completes committee reports. Public comment. Looking at you, Frank.
It was a very interesting meeting.
Thank you both.
Did you identify yourself at the microphone? Oh.
Okay, in that case, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we enter non-public in accordance to RSA 91-A:3, number 2, A, personnel.
Second.
Ted, your vote.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Zach, aye. Mary Ann.
Aye.
Aye.
Neil, aye. Perfect. We will momentarily be in non-public.